Today's show is sponsored by CBT Nuggets. We know that Cloudcast listeners are curious about technologies, but how are you really learning to master the technologies needed to be a cloud expert? You know, when Aaron and I got started, we had to buy books, set up labs, find experts, and then hope something didn't crash. CBT Nuggets makes it easy to either get hands-on skills or get certified with the latest cloud technologies. Whether it's AWS, Azure, cloud automation, security, or app dev, CBT Nuggets has you covered. What I really liked about CBT Nuggets is the online instructors are both knowledgeable and they keep it interesting. Their courses have built-in test questions, virtual coaching to help plan your certification path, and I can always jump into a virtual lab to get hands-on at any time. Check it out at cbtnuggets.com/cloudcast to sign up for a free learner account. This unlocks tons of great training, and you'll be entered into a drawing for a free 6-month premium subscription. That's cbtnuggets.com/cloudcast.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope everybody is doing well. This is a Sunday perspective show. We're going to kind of talk about a topic that, you know, I've kind of taken the other side of the conversation before on the show, as well as I've had a chance to talk about it on some other podcast. It's something that we talk about a lot, which is, kind of what are the various types of technical leaders? And I kind of got to thinking about this because if you listen to show 500 with Nick Weaver, Nick is somebody who, his career began as sort of on the end user side and very much the engineering role. He moved over to the vendor side of things. So he had to sort of change his perspective of, how do I think about the people that I interact with? How do I help them? How do I bring value to them? And then he moved back to kind of the customer facing side of things as well. But his role very much has changed as, kind of digital transformation, the internet, cloud, a lot of different things have changed. And it got me thinking about, I get a chance to talk to a lot of different companies, both in my day job, but also, as part of this show, as part of people that reach out to us. We do some consulting stuff on the side and lots of different things. And it really got me thinking about, it's kind of important to understand the different types of leaders there are out there. And we all know about kind of the tech side, the vendor side leaders, right? The people who are, they're endeared because they start a company, they, have a big personality, they've created some amazing new thing, whatever that might be. But we don't really necessarily focus as much on kind of what I'll call the customer side sort of leaders, right? And there really are different kinds of leaders. And it's kind of important to understand what type of leader they are. And what I mean by that is like, how do they think about kind of the vision of technology? How do they think about change? How do they think about the impact they have on their business? And so what I thought I would do in today's Sunday perspective is, like I said, I've had a chance to talk to a lot of different companies in a lot of different statuses across a lot of different industries. So, some more greenfield, some more brownfield, some, in the middle of what they think is digital transformation. Sometimes digital transformation is running them over. So what I thought I would do is take sort of, a bunch of years of learning, kind of compress them into sort of 3 buckets and walk through what those 3 buckets look like. So I'm going to do that right after the break. Today's show is sponsored by Datadog, a real-time monitoring platform that unifies metrics, logs, and distributed request traces from your cloud containers and orchestration software. Track the health and performance of your dynamic containers, apps, and services with rich visualizations and machine learning-driven events. Datadog's Cluster Agent streamlines data collection from large container clusters and allows you to autoscale Kubernetes workloads based on any metric you're already collecting with Datadog. To start monitoring your container clusters, sign up for a free trial today, and Datadog will send you a free t-shirt. Visit datadog.com/cloudcast to get started. That's datadog.com/cloudcast.
Today's show is sponsored by O'Reilly. O'Reilly is known for its animal books, which have helped tech professionals stay ahead for over 40 years. Today, its online learning platform at O'Reilly.com takes learning tech to the next level. Sure, your teams get access to thousands of books and videos, but there's also interactive learning, where they can get hands-on with tech like Kubernetes, Python, Docker, Java, and more in live dev environments. So they learn by doing, not just reading. With live online sessions, your teams learn from the biggest brains in AI, software architecture, cloud, data, programming, and more. They can even prep for tech certification exams with official materials and interactive practice tests. And then there's O'Reilly Answers. You just ask the search engine any tech question, and it takes you right to the best answers from O'Reilly's renowned books. It's why 66% of all Fortune 100 companies give their teams O'Reilly Online Learning. Get a demo today at O'Reilly.com. That's O'Reilly.com.
And we're back. And folks, as we mentioned in the kind of the introduction to this, both Aaron and I have been around the industry for quite a while. It's a shorthand way of saying we're probably a little older than the medium age in terms of where we are in this industry. You can figure that out. But with a little bit of age comes a little bit of wisdom. Definitely comes with a lot of you've seen a lot of things. And I think for us over the last 10 years or so, we've had a chance, because we've always kind of positioned this show as something that is fairly forward-looking. We like to sort of say it's not sort of the everyday mainstream stuff that people are doing. It tends to be maybe a year or 2 years ahead of kind of where the mainstream is for customers. But it's, we've realized over the years that, the speed and the pace of technology has sort of been increasing. But one of the byproducts of that is we get a chance to talk to a lot of different kinds of companies, partially from our day jobs. We get exposed to stuff based on what we're working on. We're both on the vendor side of the world. Part of it is we get a chance to talk to a lot of companies because of the podcast. And oftentimes, as we talk to those companies, we will, off the record, talk to them about their customers, their marketplaces, their experience. And then, a lot of times we get asked independently to look at some stuff. And one of the things that we've learned over the years is that it really is important to understand what's the motivation, what's the mindset, what's the outlook of the people that you're talking to. Because a lot of times, you think you're going in, you think you've identified what problem that you're trying to help somebody solve, or you try to understand what their time frame is. Well, are they looking at something in the near term, midterm, long term? What's their motivation? How is this going to help their company? And you think you kind of have it figured out, but it really is important to sort of understand kind of the group that you're talking to, but most importantly, the leader that you're talking to, because so many times the leaders will dictate where things are going, but it also dictates, what their motivations are, how far into the future they're looking, what are their individual ambitions versus, how they align to their corporate ambitions. And so what I thought might be sort of interesting today, like I mentioned at the top, sort of as we followed on to talking to Nick Weaver, who, as we mentioned, we've been lucky to have hundreds of guests on the show. Nick just happens to be one that we really think his journey over the last 10 years has sort of mirrored what we've seen a lot in our industry. So we like to sort of hold him up as, kind of a, someone to look at and kind of study, if you will. But we get a chance to talk to a lot of people. So what I thought I would do is sort of break this down into sort of three buckets that I always have in my mind as I'm talking to different people, trying to understand their perspective, their motivations, their view of the industry, their view of their current jobs, and so on and so forth. And I break them down into really three groups. One of them is what I'm going to call visionaries. The next one is what I'll call maintainers. And the last one is what I'm going to call resume builders. And there are different ways to look at this. I think, years ago, we used to call them, or at least there was a kind of a thing that went around called PST, pioneers, settlers, and town planners. And I think what we've seen over the last 5, 6, 7 years is some of that is still framed up. It's the same. There's some links in the show notes to some other conversations we've had about that sort of PST framework. But in this one, I kind of want to talk about it in a little more of the context that we have now in 2020 and 2021 and 2022. And so let me sort of start with this. I'm going to start with visionaries, or what I'll call transformers. So I'll give you an example of this. I had a chance to talk a couple of years ago to somebody who was in the automotive industry. And they said, look, you know us as somebody who, first and foremost, you would think of our brand as somebody who makes automobiles. We do some other things beyond that, whether it's in trucking or motorcycles or whatever it was. But it was like, hey, you know us as sort of an automotive company. And for the most part, the transactional model of us is you come to the dealership, you buy a car, we might finance it for you, you might buy it outright, and then we're sort of done, right? There might be a long-term sort of service relationship. And they said, but nowadays, the way that people have an interaction with cars is so radically different. And I kind of scratched my head and I said, well, I don't know. What do you mean? Like, is it, there's now, it's like autonomous driving. And they said, no. There's so much of a different thing because of, now it's, you may buy a car, you may lease a car, you may, rent a car for an hour or a day, right? Depending on where you live. You live out in the burbs, you're going to have a stronger relationship with your vehicle. If you live in the city, you may have a very transitive, transactional relationship with the vehicle. And they said, we want to be part of all that. And they said the second part was, we used to sell to like Hertz and Avis and the rental car companies. And now Uber and Lyft and ride-sharing companies have sort of blown up that market. And so not only do we have a different relationship with what you pick up at the airport or how you might do a temporary type of thing, but also the relationship we have with those companies as well as the drivers of those companies, because they treat their drivers differently than they did with rental cars. And they said there's this whole very, very different industry in terms of sort of the life cycle of a user's experience with a vehicle, but also the life cycle of the vehicle, who the buyers might be, how long they might be. And they said what this means is we now go from being in 2 or 3 businesses, sort of the financing of dealerships and financing of vehicles, to about 7 or 8 different dealerships, or 7 or 8 different business relationships, which is, us and the driver, us and an Uber, us and, the sort of secondary market, us maybe being able to insure the driver for that hour that they rented from whatever, us in a city. And it was really interesting to listen to this person explain all this, because it gave me this really broad perspective that they understood their industry. They understood the business, they understood the marketplace, and not just, our car versus brand X, Y, and Z, which is oftentimes how companies think about things, but the bigger macro trends that were happening, the different ways that people thought about transportation, how much they wanted to invest in a vehicle, how connected they want to be to the brand, what was the most important thing for them in terms of, transportation versus mobility versus length of ownership versus how they financed it. And it was really a fascinating conversation. And so I lumped that type of person, the person who can step back from the pure technology, the pure bits of what they're looking at, how to run servers or use the cloud, and really say, are we going to be able to use technology to shape our business? Are we really people that are going to transform what we do? Or if the business tells us, hey, we're moving in these directions, that you're going to be able to stay a step ahead of them, 2 steps ahead of them, right? Be able to have, interesting technology that's going to be pushing that envelope. And so I put those people into this category that I call visionaries. I think they're very interesting. They look at both opportunities. They understand opportunity costs. They understand the breadth of these competitive threats from their business, but also, how do they take their brand, their assets, their financial might or challenges, and turn those into an advantageous situation. So, when you find those sort of people, they're not looking for purely technology decisions. They're looking for people to partner with them. They're looking for people to bring, ideas, to bring them market data, to experiment with them. So those are always really fun ones. The challenge with them is obviously they've got to be able to find wins. They're oftentimes going to be very open to the idea of the systems that we used to have in place before just aren't going to work anymore, right? They're not necessarily trying to bolt something new onto something old. So, you've got to go into a mindset with somebody like that. Try and become a peer to them. Try and, become a partner with them, not just a vendor transaction situation. They're not purely looking for technology. Oftentimes they're looking for creative ideas. They're looking for new partnership opportunities. So they want to take advantage of your ecosystem, your partnerships, and all those types of things. So the visionaries are very, very interesting. Obviously, they're under pressure to help with these new initiatives and so forth. But they're always a very, very fun type of person to work with. Usually, they're risking their career by taking on this big vision, but the payoff is oftentimes very, very big as well. The next one that I'll talk about is what I'll call maintainers or protectors, if you will. And this is, kind of your classic IT technology type of leader, right? They're the ones who will tell you that, 80% of their budget goes into keeping the lights on. Sometimes it's 90%, sometimes it's, 70%. And then somewhere between 10 and 30% is on innovation. Now, they would love to be a visionary, but they're always sort of defaulting back to focusing on re-optimizing that 70 or 80 or 90% of the spend. And they don't spend as much of their time, how do you take advantage of the 10, 20, 30% that could drive your business, that could really reshape what your business does? And that means not only investing in the people around them, being willing to bring in outside talent with a new view on things, being willing to say, hey, this new technology that came along, it may not necessarily help us move that 60, 70, 80% forward, But what it can do for that 10, 20, 30% of us might really reshape what we do. They don't necessarily have enough vision to do that. And this becomes the big thing between sort of the visionaries and the maintainers is, they're tied to being afraid of kind of interrupting the things that work today, the things that everybody expects of the business. The second thing is they tend to run sort of long-term RFI processes. They don't necessarily think about creating a mindset of incremental experimental scenarios, right? Like, it's, we're going to evaluate things, then we're going to make a big choice, right? Sort of the waterfall way of thinking about what their future looks like as opposed to a more sort of agile thought process, not just agile development, but agile ability to experiment with new things, treat your vendors and your communities as partners, not necessarily sort of vendors where it's a transactional relationship. You're thinking about them as somebody who's going to, help you figure out how to make that 10%, 20%, 30% really impactful. And then the last thing that I find about them a lot is, they very much have a protectionist mindset, right? That you'll go in, you'll start talking to them, they'll begin to talk about sort of the visionary idea they have. And then it quickly falls back into, well, we want to avoid vendor lock-in. We want to, make sure that, we're not going to make a mistake that we made the last time around. It was we're tied into our database. Oh, we're tied into our authentication system. Oh, we're tied into our automation system, whatever it is. So we're going to focus on no vendor lock-in. We want to focus on portability and those types of things. And those sound great, at the beginning. Obviously, we all know that the more sort of lack of lock-in, if that even exists, the less pure functionality you're going to get for any given piece of a system. And then what tends to happen is they sort of forget about sunk costs. They go, oh, well, you brought me an idea and it sort of checked those boxes of, not being tied to things, but how does it tie back to my old systems, right? So they're constantly coming back to this kind of gravity, if you will, of the legacy systems and only integrating with those legacy systems, unlike the visionary who realizes, hey, this new opportunity, this new environment, this new partnership we have, this new market we're going to get into, those old systems just weren't built for this way of doing things. They weren't built for the speed. They weren't built for the flexibility. So, oftentimes in those cases, it's going to be a more difficult situation, right? You're going to constantly be ping-ponging back and forth between the things that are new and exciting and trying to show them what's possible and them coming back and going, yeah, but does it do this old thing? Yeah, but does it do this other legacy thing? Will it integrate with my old stuff? And so you're kind of have a lot of, sort of dissonance between what's new and exciting a little bit and then going back to the old, and a little bit new and exciting going back to the old. And so, when you engage with those sort of leaders, you sort of have to have the mindset of, okay, we're going to kind of pacify a little bit of their excitement of what's new, but then we're also going to have to know that, every release is always going to fall a little bit short. Every new capability you bring out is going to be a little bit short. And you just have to know not to become frustrated with that. They're trying to do the best they can, but, and then sometimes, there's an opportunity to educate them, right? Show them examples of other visionaries, show them examples of how they can grow their career, how they can better communicate with their manager, their groups, their organizations about that 10, 20, 30%. Because quite honestly, they're probably not going to get promoted by being great at optimizing, re-optimizing the things that are sunk costs, the things that are the 60, 70, 80% of, just keeping the lights on and so forth. So there's an opportunity as much as you're doing day-to-day transactional stuff, but to also kind of educate them, right? Show them what's possible, make introductions to those other people that they may aspire to become, and try and teach them how to move into those places. The last one that I have on the list is what I'll call resume builders, and this is something that feels a little bit new. Obviously, everybody who works in the tech industry knows people that have bounced around from job to job. In some cases, it was a bad fit. In some cases, people will call them kind of job hoppers or career seekers or so forth. We see that a lot on the vendor side of things because maybe you were involved with something and the company didn't work out, or the technology that you were working on kind of faded away. But what we see on the sort of end user side of things, the customer side of things, if you will, is we're seeing sort of a new thing, right? We used to see, like at the CIO level or the VP of whatever level, maybe 5 or 6 years, you would be around for really a big project, a supply chain, an ERP project, an implementation of a brand new huge system put in place. And you do that for 4 or 5 years, you would get recognized for it, you'd get it up and running, it would become operational, you kind of got it, working, to where the benefits were beginning to be seen, and then you move on to the next company. And so you had an opportunity to go, I can take that learning to another company in the same industry, another company in a different industry. And so you would see these sort of job hopping things maybe after 5 or 6 years at higher levels. And you knew, why they were getting hired, because they had solved the problem of the previous one. They were going to take on the same sort of challenge, probably make a little bit more money, maybe move into an industry that was more desirable. Maybe they moved from one that was low profit margins to one that was a little higher profit margins. And what we're seeing these days, especially with cloud computing, is we're now seeing this sort of 2-year cycle where you see a lot of, we've all heard of it, right? The CIO, the VP of whatever, who comes along and says, we're going to implement a cloud first strategy. We're going to move, X percent, oftentimes all in or everything into the cloud in a finite amount of time. And more it seems like it's this statement of we're going to move everything into the cloud within 2 years. And what you sort of realize in digging into these things, when you start breaking it down, it's like, are there new things that would make sense in the cloud? Absolutely. Are there some things that you could lift and shift or easily modernize, sort of same to same, move into the cloud? Absolutely. What does that normally get you? Well, it'll normally get you somewhere between 20% and 50 or 60%, right? Depending on, how basic of a sort of movement or a shift or a refactoring that you try and do into the cloud. But then there's the other 30, 40, 50, 60% that you're like, there's no way that you're going to be able to do that. And you're not going to be able to do it either because it's tied to hardware, it's tied to legacy software, it's tied to these strange, networking or security or storage requirements or regulatory requirements or location requirements. And you go, okay, well, in reality, you're not going to get there. But they're beating the drum. They want to say they're going to do 100% of everything. They want you to help them with a plan to get to 100% of everything. And what you realize is, they're there to get that cloud thing or that new thing. Maybe it's a Kubernetes, maybe it's a DevOps, maybe it's a serverless, maybe it's a data warehouse or some other thing on their resume. And within 2 years, they're going to be able to learn the technologies. They're going to be able to do some prototypes. They're going to maybe get 2 or 3 of those important projects out there. They're not going to get everything, but you quickly realize that's not really their goal. Right? They did an awesome job of being a visionary up front. They sold this to their organization as, this is the wave of the future. I'm the person to drive this. I should be funded to make this happen. And you got to be a little bit careful because on one hand, you don't want to tell them they're crazy and you don't want to tell them that they're not doing what's in the right, the best interest of the business. But you also have to realize this person, or maybe even the group that they have, may not be around for past those 2 years. Right? And so you've got to sort of help them put some things in place such that even though you help them move certain things to the cloud or you help them transition certain things or prepare them to, you don't want to necessarily be stuck when they leave and the company that you're working with is sort of like, whoa, we're in this limbo, we're in this transitional phase that we can't get out of, and our systems, which were really important, we can't run them the way we wanted to. So, this is another one where, you very much want to be educating. You want to, help them understand what part of what they're doing is very visionary. You want to help learn with them in terms of what's the best way to move them so that they're going to have the portion that they're working on for, say, those couple of years to be really successful. Because at the end of the day, even if that person's leaving, they're really resume building, you want their organization to be successful, right? You never want to sort of help somebody go down a path that is a dead end. And so, again, it's really important to understand all these different transitions, right? What's the time frame? Whether you're talking to a visionary, a maintainer, or a resume builder, what time frame are they talking about? What part of it is realistic? What part can you help them from a technology perspective? What part can you help educate them, whether that's about the technology, about the industry, about other people who have gone down this path? But it's really important to understand, what's their motivation. And they may not always tell you, but you kind of have to pick up some signs here and there. You have to ask around. But you also have to be prepared, again, even if you see one path going on, you got to always be thinking, I'm going to try and make them successful and make them as successful as we can, even if they transition from one stage to a next. you also have to be prepared that, even for all the great visions that are out there, the great visionaries that are out there, the great promises of technology, sometimes they're going to fail. And so you want to have some pragmatism built in as well. So anyways, hope this was helpful. Like I said, if you're lucky enough to work with a lot of different companies, it's truly an honor to help them transform their businesses. It's truly an honor to be part of working with people who put themselves on the line and say, look, I'm going to work on new technologies. We don't know if they're going to work. We've got mission critical systems. We're going to put ourselves on the line to hopefully, make their businesses successful, help their customers, get from point A to point B, transact business, whatever they're doing. And so it's really very interesting to be part of those things. But in terms of trying to make everybody successful, at the end of the day, it is really important to understand a lot of those other motivations beyond just which technologies you're picking. What's their motivation? What's their time frame? What are their goals? How can you help them? How can you introduce them to people in industry, across industries, across ecosystems? And if you get a chance to do that, that's a win-win all around. So hopefully this was helpful to give you some perspective, some of the things that we've seen over the last 5 years, 10 years on how to read situations and how to apply certain kind of good practices in terms of helping people be successful depending on what they're trying to accomplish. So with that, I'm going to wrap up today's Sunday Perspective. Hope everybody enjoyed today's show. Hope you've been enjoying the Wednesdays and Sunday shows. And also, if you've had a chance to tell a friend about Cloudcast Basics, that continues to roll along. We're going to have a new one out probably in, not at the end of March, just because of some timing with spring break, but we'll have one out probably in early April. So if you had a chance to tell a friend about that, we'd love to help grow the Cloudcast community, if you will. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and we'll talk to everybody next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.